the working class rising up. This is the ruling class punching down.
My day, bigger your day.
First rule of gladiator school, bro. Don't punch down.
Charging into a goblin's Hail, Trump!
The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
Control your own body.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
We can fight the entire grinding system. Nobody can. But together, everybody can.
I did nothing wrong.
Hello and welcome to Did Nothing Wrong Live, the show that cuts through the noise and helps you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff, and with me is Karl. In today's episode, we talk about how the Trump administration has escalated from disappearing immigrants to disappearing judges, and how that plays into their pervasive narrative that it's the damned activist judges that are holding Trump back from making America great again. Thanks again for your support. Keep listening to learn more, and remember to smash those like and subscribe buttons like I'm sure the Homeland Security agents will be doing to our front doors after they hear this episode. So today's big story is out of Wisconsin, where federal agents arrested a Wisconsin judge on Friday after she allegedly helped an undocumented immigrant evade arrest. Yeah, they're arresting judges now that disagree with them. Sit with that for a sec. Just sit with that. That's where we're at.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's happening, right? And like, this has been one of the bigger sticking points for people, like wondering what the red lines were, right?
Right.
And today definitely was the crossing of a major red line and a major, milestone in the history of American authoritarianism.
Yep.
And it's definitely not the last one by any means, but this is one that now, this is a huge deal, and people are rightly angry and scared, and the context of it is even worse, right? Like, there's no part of this where there's any mistaking what it was.
Nope.
And, you have Kash Patel out here.
Oh, yeah, that was great. Kash Patel announcing in an X post that was quickly deleted, by the way. He really said that one with his whole chest. That Milwaukee Circuit Court Judge Hannah Dugan has been charged with obstruction for allegedly assisting Eduardo Flores Ruiz in avoiding arrest after he appeared in her courtroom last week. So I've got Patel's tweet here. I'm going to read it. It says, "Just now, the FBI arrested Judge Hannah Dugan out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin on charges of obstruction after evidence of Judge Dugan obstructing an immigration arrest operation last week. We believe Judge Dugan intentionally misdirected federal agents away from the subject to be arrested in her courtroom, Eduardo Flores Ruiz, allowing the subject, an illegal alien, to evade arrest. Thankfully, our agents chased down the perp on foot and he's been in custody since, but the judge's obstruction created increased danger to the public. We will have more to share soon. Excellent work, FBI Milwaukee." And that didn't stay up very long. For some reason, the guy who goes on the QAnon podcasts and grifts on the QAnon merchandise didn't want to leave that up for very long.
Yeah.
It's like, say that with your whole chest, buddy. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, y'all did it, so stand behind it, right? And like, that's the thing. We're so deep into the weeds and so far through the looking glass on this. That, like, people really don't, I think there's a speed element where this has gone a lot faster than a lot of people thought. And it's also seemed rather benign in a lot of ways for most people. And like, most people aren't seeing the harsh reality of this yet. And this is a pretty harsh reality kind of moment for a lot of people.
Oh, it really is. And
I don't know, in the context of the day, I mean, what's absolutely crazy. It's Friday, the 25th of April. While we're recording this, and I mean, that story is a huge story, but it's in amongst a couple of other massively upsetting and problematic stories to come out today.
Absolutely. And you're starting to see the pushback from, this is from the Milwaukee Journal online, and they're interviewing a guy by the name of Franklin Gimble, who's apparently a prominent Milwaukee defense attorney and former federal prosecutor. He's got a point here when he says a person who is a judge, who has a residence, who has no problems being found, should not be arrested, if you will, like some common criminal, Gimble said. And I'm shocked and surprised that the U.S. Attorney's Office or the FBI would not have invited her to show up and accept process if they're going to charge her with a crime. And it's like, guy, they wanted to send a message. They
Yeah.
wanted every judge that's thinking about doing the right thing in the face of this kind of bullshit to think twice, because
Yeah.
you could end up locked up.
Yep. Yeah. And
Yeah.
have multiple felonies put against them.
Uh-huh. She's been charged with 2 felonies.
Yeah.
And, you know, you don't got to take our word for it. Here's the mayor of Milwaukee, quoted in the same article, the amazingly named Cavalier Johnson. Mayor Cavalier Johnson also slammed the Trump administration's move, calling it ham-handed, haphazard, and being more about showboating than actually keeping Milwaukee's communities safe. If a judge is being arrested in a courthouse, just imagine the chilling effect it sends to other folks who would otherwise participate in judicial proceedings in our courthouse. And not just in the Milwaukee County courthouse, but courthouses across the state of Wisconsin and courthouses across the United States, Johnson said. I mean, not only has he got a great name, he's absolutely right on this.
Yes.
This is a chilling effect. This is something that they're doing to try and warn the others, as it were. They want the judges to think twice about going near a case like this. And you're right. There's a ton of other stuff. I mean, this is like absolutely one of the most significant escalations.
So you have this story, you know, coming out this morning. Then you have about the same time, you have it coming out that a memo from the administration and from Bondi has said that ICE can, you know, basically break into your home without a warrant now.
Right.
And they can, you know, they can abduct and deport you. Right. And so, you know, we're getting into areas where, like, you know, the White House is now saying for law enforcement, ICE, Customs and Border Patrol, and others to directly just step over the 4th, 5th, and 15th Amendments, to name just a few off the top of my head. And, you know, we're talking due process, due protection, like the whole gamut of laws that underpin democratic society for us and have forever.
Right.
And so, you know, today's been one of those days where truly this is probably the heaviest day so far in certain ways for where we're headed and what their very, very clearly stated goals are now.
Yeah.
Right. Like they are outlining a set of goals and a set of new rules for society that are really, no one's ready for this. And
no, nobody is at all.
We formed this country based on some grievances we had with the crown, let's say. And
there was a list of 27 of them.
Yes. And those 27 grievances, I mean, that we're getting into a point where this administration and the Republicans as an entity are brushing into history, right? Not just in the way that they're doing things and not just in the way that they're pulling bits and pieces of different authoritarian and fascist movements to create their own.
No.
But in the way that they are putting us on track to be, right? Like they are directly bumping into historic stuff that, like, is foundational to America, let's just say.
So here's what I think we ought to do. I think we're going to do a new segment, and I think it's going to be called Grievance Watch. And there's 27 grievances of the United States attached to the Declaration of Independence, which were all stated as some of the reasons why the colonists, the original folks who wrote the Declaration of Independence, decided that they had to break away from England. And you read this stuff and you're kind of like, oh my God, we are getting into a grievance 3. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. Huh, that's weird. Yeah. That sounds a whole lot like the idea of, like, some states having tons of representation for very little people.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. No, I mean, Grievance 3 is really one of those ones where it's like, okay, we're getting close, and then you get to somewhere like let's jump to Grievance 12.
Mhm.
He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. And we've seen what they're doing within the military infrastructure. We've seen what their stated goal is with the military, and we've seen that Hegseth is now, I guess, outside of the ability for anyone to stop him but the White House, and they've decided
Uh-huh.
not to. And so, you know, that is one example of many that I can think of right off the top of my head for, you know, for Grievance 12. And, you
Uh-huh.
know, to be fair, glancing blows on any of these is pretty outrageous when we are 105 days in.
Yeah. We're
Like,
barely scratching the surface of, the 4 years that this Joker's in for. And, I'll give you a threefer on this one. 16, 17, and 18. 16 for cutting
yes,
off our trade with all parts of the world.
Yep.
17 for imposing taxes on us without our consent, like tariffs, you mean?
Yes.
And 18 for depriving us in many cases of the benefit of jury trial, kind of like those folks who got shipped off to CCOT in El Salvador.
Correct.
That would tie into 19 for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended defenses. Well, at least they were going to try people under this.
Yeah.
They're not even making any pretense about trials over here. And this is what we're faced with now, is like, you go down this list and you can see, oh my God, they are violating rule after rule after grievance after grievance. And we celebrate a day dedicated every year to the people who wrote that document and had those grievances, because they were right. What they did was correct. They bounced.
Yeah.
And we're getting there at this point.
It's truly shocking, right?
Mhm.
Like, I did not think, even in some of the darker moments of where I kind of had estimated where this would go, did I think that we were going to have a conversation on this show specifically that's probably going to end up being an ongoing thing about the really bizarre ways that Trump has now run into our own history. And I think that that's the bigger story here, right? Like, the Trump and the administration is so far outside of the norms, not just for American democracy, but for authoritarianism, that they're bouncing into foundational elements of the story of America.
Right.
You know, as much as Americans are taught this sanitized version of our history throughout our school, you know, our younger school years.
Right.
This is the stuff that is actually the most important parts in my mind, is looking at the actual reasoning behind why America decided to bounce.
Right.
And when you actually see it laid out against what someone like Trump, who does pull in other ways from history, bouncing into it like this, you know, I think this is going to be more powerful than people thought. And the pushback, I think, is going to be more muted at the beginning, but as it happens more and different things happen, this really seems to have a different effect on people. You know,
and considering the one
people,
message that's really caught on with the crowds at these rallies, which, again, we had another big protest last weekend, and it went about the same as the first one. Millions of people out there in the streets everywhere. The message that really is catching on, that you see on the most signs, is no kings. No kings. It's very simple. It's very easy to point out what this means. We don't do kings in this country. We can disagree on a lot of things.
Foundational shit here. We don't fuck with kings. Like, we don't do it.
Hey, here's a list of reasons why we broke away from the king in the first place back in the day. And guess what? All the same shit's happening now. This is not a hard sell. This is not a hard explanation for people.
And people really, I mean, truly, you know, people have figured it out. People are putting together the pieces that you've done well on this show over the years to get out to people, and others have as well. And
a lot of people out there doing good work on this, honestly.
Yeah, no, there are tons of people out there doing the hard work of getting it out there. And that though, now we're in a position where this is the world we are going to live in.
Yeah.
And for me, I've been calling them more and more, calling this movement, the MAGA, the whole thing within government now, an accelerationist movement, because that's what we're seeing, right? And this is more in line, but not perfectly aligned with the techno-fascist movement. And so it's really interesting seeing that in light of like the historic documents that we know this country has, and the reasoning behind why we did this, because it does mirror in so many ways, because in some ways it's a similar threat, even though it's much more homegrown.
It absolutely is. It's a feeling of these people have checked out on the current system. They want to go ahead and watch it all crash. This is what they have in common with the accelerationists that we think of as being accelerationists. Their whole purpose, and when we're talking about accelerationists, we're talking about groups like Adam Waffen, we're talking about 09A, people who want to see society crash and burn. That is their stated goal, because they assume that they're going to be able to rebuild anew out of the ashes. And this is where what you said is accurate. It absolutely dovetails with what the techno-fascists want, because for them, they want it all to crash so they can build their techno-feudal utopia out of the ashes. Places like Honduras, where they're already doing that. They're taking, chunks of the peninsula and calling it, their own sort of techno-fascist utopia, and doing unlicensed scientific experiments down there.
Well, and weapons testing, the whole deal, right? And like that's the whole thing, right? Like this all starts to look very much like the historic alignments that we would recognize from our own history,
right?
In these moments. And I think that that's really important for people to keep front and center with this, right? Like No Kings is a great message for that reason. And King George III was a villain in a lot of ways, and in similar ways, right? And this is politics, but also it's kind of the way that money and power and authority start to align in really kind of basic ways,
right?
And all of this stuff that we've seen today, kind of news-wise, is part of that same, let's say, symptomology of American authoritarianism or fascism. Like, it's all part of that. And when you have Bondi out here saying what they're saying and putting out the memo saying you can go into people's homes under the Alien Enemies Act, you've got them arresting judges, and then you have the other kind of side things going on, whether it's Patel putting up his piece today and then we're immediately scaring himself. I
believe the phrase you're looking for here is dick tuck, but
yes, I believe that actually is the term. And then you have things like what happened at the state level today in Indiana, where you have the Indiana governor and the state legislature working together kind of behind the scenes to strip the college of their governing power, right? Like they took over completely and kind of did it as part of the end of legislative year thing, with zero pushback and no notification. I mean, we're seeing it all over, this consolidation, this morphing from a liberal democracy to an illiberal, fascist state.
Yeah. And let's talk about Pam Bondi for a minute. She was on Fox News declaring war on the courts.
We could not believe, actually, that a judge really did that. They're deranged is all I can think of. I cannot believe. I think some of these judges think they are beyond and above the law, and they are not.
Yep.
What has happened to our judiciary?
Totally normal stuff, Griff.
Yeah, totally normal stuff. We are sending a message, a very strong message today. We will come after you and we will prosecute you. We will find you. And here's what is fascinating about that in a really dark and awful, disturbing kind of way. There's been a narrative that's been bubbling up amongst the far-right commentators, people like Jack Posobiec, Jesse Kelly, have been saying that if these judges continue to stand in Trump's way, the right will demand a dictator. Like, here's a quote from Jesse Kelly on Twitter. Ignore the Supreme Court. Arrest anyone who tries to enforce this. Dissolve the Supreme Court entirely if they push. You can deport foreigners, or you don't have a country anymore. There are no good choices now. And Donald Trump is the last thing before we get a dictator. I wonder if he knows this. not a left-wing dictator either. The right
Yeah.
will demand a dictator if Trump is not allowed to implement the will of the voters, and they will get one. A terrible place to be as a country. And this is seeding the ground
Yeah.
for doing things like arresting judges.
Yeah.
They have their folks primed to accept that.
Well, yeah,
Whereas it's a real third world dictatorship move to go around and doing this.
Well, this is one of those things where they're using, so I'm working on a paper right now kind of positing this, but the Republicans and the far right and fascists in general use conspiracy theory to ready the field for their actual real world actions. So
Right.
in this case, the right's been inundated for 10 years now with the Red Caesar narrative, the coming Republican autocracy and how that's good, all these different things kind of getting people ready for this.
Yep.
At the same time, they've had 20 plus years of hard conspiracy theories from people like Alex Jones saying that, well, the forces against you have already done this, so it's okay to act against them in any way needed. So you have this two-pronged kind of assault going on the Republican base, and it's it literally inoculates them against any future actions Trump might take, because quote to them, quote, the left has already done it, end quote. And then you have the other part, which is that it reinforces this idea that Trump is acting to protect them.
Right.
And we're getting into a place now where they're readying the field for absolutely heinous actions.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're doing it at a really fast time scale, which is kind of concerning as to what that actually means their intention.
Right. And let's not forget that part of the reason they were able to get people to buy this so thoroughly and so quickly is because they couched a lot of this stuff in, religious language.
Yeah.
Alex Jones specifically, they'll refer to their opponents as demonic. They'll talk about how these people are possessed by Satan and how it's actually Satan doing this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And if your opponent is possessed by Satan and you believe that Satan should be opposed at all costs, what's too far to go?
Well, right.
There isn't one.
And then, in the steps, there's so many bits and pieces of this movement that are functioning on their own, but working towards this other system that's come into place. It's really hard because they're not actually, coordinated, but they're working in a way where they all flow into each other and work together kind of as a synergistic, entity. And so, when you couple this part with the Christian identity and white nationalist / fascist stuff that's been percolating for years,
right?
That you've talked about with different guests on the show before, and I'm sure listeners have heard about. This all starts to dovetail into the larger movement that we see, but most people don't see it that way. And so, the topography of this really is, much more organized towards a religious bent, but they're using, again, any means necessary to gain the power to enact their will. And their will is an accelerationist goal. Ultimately, this is the eugenics, the eugenics part from RFK, the explicit push into pronatalism and the kind of techno-fascist 14-word side of, kind of new generations having kids.
Yep.
All of these pieces, come together in some total with a really heinous movement that now we're starting to see kind of its full weight on society. And I think, this is going to get much more clearly defined here over the next couple weeks because they are moving very quickly.
Right. And the nice thing about this is that people are starting to see it. You're starting to see mainstream pushback on this concept. You're starting to see people who we talked a little bit last week about, guys like Bill Kristol, saying that this was something that was well past any sort of political disagreement at this point.
Right.
And, I think the mainstream folks have started to catch on that something is very, very wrong here. And you're seeing that by the number of people who showed up at the courthouse in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, the federal courthouse, to protest this decision. They got thousands. And it was not a very long period of time. It was just, hey, show up.
No, literally, it's in the evening on the night of Friday, and yeah, there are thousands of people in the street in Milwaukee. And when I was driving across the city maybe 2 hours ago, there were people out on the street in front of the where the mayor and everyone kind of at City Hall are.
Right.
And I mean, that's spur of the moment stuff, and they might have had 200 or 300 people, but the more people who can and are willing to drop what they're doing to go out and do these things, and the larger these protests are, the more prolonged they are, the better chance we have at staving some of this off.
Yeah.
Because realistically, people want it to be the other way around, but the reality is we have to be the ones that take the first steps before lawmakers are going to do a damn thing.
Right.
And we're going to have to hold their hand and say, look, you done fucked up, and we're going to have to walk you out to where we are now, because where you are is an untenable position. And it's just how it is. And if they don't come, well, then we have to deal with that then.
Right.
But the reality is, the larger the protest, the harder it is to ignore it.
Yeah.
And what we've seen is that people are listening. It's just they don't get it reinforced enough in a lot of cases to give themselves the permission to do what they need to do, whether that's go and protest or whatever that is. And that's what has to happen now, right? Like, the right has given itself permission to do heinous stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they're gearing up to do some of that. And they're already doing other parts of it. We as a population have to step up and say, look, if that's the case, we have to step up too. And we're starting to see that. So that's good. And people are starting to actually understand this threat is not a political threat. This is a existential threat.
Yeah.
And that's a huge shift. And I think the more that happens, the more untenable it is for people not to see it, because the more people you have talking about this in the real way that it's acting, and the real way that this is going to impact people over the next month, really, as the tariffs really start to be felt, that's going to be important, because this is going to get very wishy-washy socially very quickly. When some of this stuff with tariffs was kind of a slow cook, but now it's going to happen. And you couple that with this stuff that's going on with the judges and with ICE being given what looks to be extraordinarily unconstitutional powers, and the conversations going on between the White House and others.
Yeah. And
we're in a very different place.
We are in a place right now where it feels like the whole thing has sped up to a point where it's almost untenable, because you've got one side absolutely trying. It just keeps seeming like we're going to get everything we can out of this before it all crashes down. It's like they almost know that it's all going to crash down, because you can't not have it crash down when you've made the moves that they've made.
Well, and and I mean, that's the problem, right? Like, all the ambiguity here is leaving everyone open to all kinds of things, whether that's conspiratorial thinking, whether that's really just getting lost in the sauce of the eternal present that is social media, all of that. And like, we know that certain things are happening. They just take more time than a lot of people. We also know that pushback works the same way. So like, we've seen some large protests. We're starting to see more, quickly formed kind of emergency actions like today, and that's great. But I think people are going to really get pushed into a position where this is going to become very existential for everyone.
Right.
Kind of at pace from here on out. And the accelerations politically, and I'm putting big air quotes around politically, this push into overt, open authoritarianism and fascist rule, that's going to accompany it. But I think the reaction is going to be more in waves to the things like shipments not arriving, to, you know, the real day-to-day stuff versus the holy shit material that you and I and others are
Right.
covering
Right.
today. Those, though, are in the context of that. So, like, I think this movement's going to grow. I think it's going to be really interesting here, especially as this the assault on the judicial system accelerates. I don't think people were entirely ready for the
No, no, I
full-on
don't at all. And I
game
don't think a lot of the judges were entirely ready.
No, that's what I mean.
But the
I think a lot of
reason
people on the
they're
ground
doing
were.
this is because the judges have actually done a pretty good job at this
Yeah.
point of pushing back. A lot of these judges, including judges who were appointed under like Bush 1 and Reagan.
Oh, and Reagan. I mean,
Yeah.
these are not liberal, you know, like
They ain't a bunch of hippies.
This is not a bunch of Marxist, you know,
No.
hippie judges. No. No.
But everybody who doesn't let them do exactly what they want to do when they want to do it is a Marxist. That's just
Yeah.
how this works with these people.
Yeah, well, that's how
they know it's
fascism.
shitty
Yeah,
branding, so you're a Marxist if you oppose us.
the branding for fascist is very simple, and that is criminal Marxist. Like for anything that's even remotely left of goring, you know.
Yeah,
I mean,
you know, rootless cosmopolitans, criminal Marxists. It's all pretty much the same kind of thing.
Cultural Bolshevism, like we've heard. I mean, this is the thing, though. This has
all
been
the hits.
Well, and it's been permeating these groups now for 20 years.
Yeah.
And it's been permeating politics for 15.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I mean, we're just deep in the weeds, and like I talked about the last couple weeks, like they've been doing world building for 20 years, and now they're starting to steamroll the physical world to put up a new parking lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's pretty much where we are at this point. We are looking at this bunch that just have convinced themselves that they will not be stopped, that they is their time, they are ascendant, and they're just absolutely going for it right now.
Yeah.
You've got the Doge folks, you've got various legislatures passing all kinds of just craziness.
Yeah.
And if there was ever a time to fight back, it's now. It's before this thing gets even more entrenched and heavy, because people still have the capacity to be shocked by this. People still have the capacity to look at this and say, "Oh no, this is not good. This is not happening."
Right. No, and I think that outrage is key to this, right? Like people need to stay angry because it's right to be angry, like not just at the human rights abuses these people are doing, and not just at the snubbing their nose at 250 years of American democracy.
Yeah.
But also at the moment to moment things where you find yourself outraged, that's good. That means you're functioning correctly. And you know, the outrage is going to galvanize all of us to do different things at different times. And that's just how this is going to be for a while. And, you know, I think there's a real chance by Sunday, there are major protests.
Yeah.
If this isn't corrected. And I think that, you know, we are definitely not out of time in this country, but we are right up against a wall where it gets much more costly.
Yeah.
To rout out the cancer. And we're already at a point where a lot of what's been damaged is going to be lost. In all seriousness, even if it's been deemed illegal, even if a court said to correct it, we're going to have a lot of loss already.
Right.
And we want to minimize that going forwards. And that means the more we act, the sooner we act as a group and as a country and as people who object and truly do have grievance with this. You know, the sooner we do that as a group and the more often we do that, the more likely we are to avert some of the really catastrophic society upending damage that could be done here. And we're right in the zone for it to happen.
And they're coming for all of us. They are absolutely coming for all of us. I mean,
anyone.
It came up yesterday that Trump signed an executive memorandum aimed at investigating Act Blue, which is the leading Democratic fundraising platform, because they've been alleging that online fundraising platforms like Act Blue are making straw or dummy contributions from foreign governments to political candidates and committees. It's like, like
normal bullshit
normal
come
stuff
together.
for people who don't run meme coins and try to raise money like that. They really should have just gone crypto, I guess. That should have been what they'd done. But this is we are targeting our political opponents. I can only imagine
Yeah.
if Biden had gone after WinRed, which is the
Yeah.
Republican equivalent, just the absolute howling that would have resulted as a result of that.
Oh yeah. Well, and I mean, it's really, this is an example of Trump and the movement targeting power bases for the Democratic Party and for more broadly the way that we do democracy here, right?
Yes.
And by targeting Act Blue and saying, allegations regarding the use of online fundraising platforms to make quote straw or dummy contributions, blah 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 blah. I mean, these are the kind of allegations you make in a blanket way, right? And saying there's significant fraud schemes using Act Blue, quote unquote, all of this. I mean, that's cover for the real attack, which is on the power bases for anyone in opposition to the Republican Party, to Trump, to the fascist regime they're building.
Yes.
And it's the way, so like for people who don't know, Act Blue is the way that we do grassroots fundraising.
Yeah.
Right. So like every time you donate, let's say to Bernie or to AOC or to any of your favorite politicians, God help us all, you use Act Blue. And it is the only trusted system for the Democratic Party. And again, this is one in the context of everything else. It's very clear what this is. It's not a one-off, oh, that's weird. It's part of a concerted effort to target certain individual pillars of any kind of actual organized resistance to the party.
Yeah.
And it's, it goes part and parcel with attacking Harvard now in the way that they have. It goes part and parcel with the way that they're starting to gear up to target states.
Yep.
And, this is the game plan now. And the U.S. government is using the Department of Justice as a tool now to install and absolutely cement, where it can, authoritarian dictatorial rule from the executive branch.
Yes.
And we understand that the unified executive theory that the Supreme Court okayed this year, really was as threatening as everyone who warned it would be is. And this is where we're at now. And I don't think people have fully put together that, like, this Act Blue attack, for example, is part of a broader attack on all forms of pushback.
Yep.
Like it hasn't hit yet, and it may later this weekend or next week, but this is a big deal.
Yeah.
Right? Like in amongst the other stories as we've seen, which are big deals, this is a really big deal.
Right. Because it's coming for everybody. If they can come for Act Blue, they can come for your podcast. They can come for this podcast. They can come for anybody who's saying anything that they don't like. And that's why it's heartening to see stuff like the colleges that banded together this week to say, no, we're all going to, stick together and try to push back against this thing. Like, Columbia University bent the knee. Seems like everybody else has thought a little harder about it and has decided that, no, we're not going to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thankfully, we are starting to see what might be some meaningful resistance out of academia.
There's glimmers of solidarity breaking out, right? Like there's actual glimmers of a little bit of solidarity, and it's definitely not perfect. It's definitely not huge, but it's starting to happen, and that's great. We need more of it. We need to all have, each other's backs on this, and we really all have to step up now, because this is the beginning of a whole new thing. A whole new phase for all of us, right? Started this morning when when the news broke that they arrested this judge. And the rest of this sits in context and situ of that. And, we have to act.
Right.
And there are going to be spontaneous protests, there are going to be other things. And the more, the better.
Get out there. If you see
Yeah.
something spontaneous happen, if you hear about it, in your friend group, be smart, but get out there and make sure
Yeah.
that they know that you're out there. Make a sign. Keep it simple. Don't try to make your sign too complicated. Don't try to
No,
get everything on here. No kings. Boy, that's a great slogan.
no
Keep
kings
going with
is
that.
really just stick in that world and you'll be fine.
Yeah, you just stick in that. Keep it simple. Keep it something people can totally relate to. And you're drawing the vast majority of people in with that. The
Yeah.
numbers are already starting to reflect this. He's, 59% disapproval now.
Yeah.
He's
That's
almost
those are
freaking
rookie
underwater with this.
those are rookie numbers. We need to get those up, but that's
Mhm.
not hard to do, and it's going to increasingly get easy to do. And people, the more people that do choose to go out and make signs, go out and get a little bit weird and do a little bit of good trouble,
Mhm.
the better off we all are.
Yeah.
And the more that happens, the more likely we are to have more people come in and do the same.
Right.
And the more groups you can get together, whether or not you agree with all of them, the more ability you have to do multiple things at once.
Right.
And, when you have large workers groups and you have large groups of people who are well versed in protests, it's good to find them.
Mhm.
And it's good to have those groups in amongst with your normies and your moms and dads and your,
Right.
your day traveler protesters.
Because there's a symbiosis there. There's a sense of energy that
Yeah.
certain parts of the protest scene haven't had in years that's
Yes.
coming to this. And there's a sense of like, we can help you avoid some of the pitfalls that are likely to hit you
Right.
that can help people that have never tried to do anything like this before. So
Exactly. And there's
go
a
into it
wealth.
with an attitude of cooperation, go into it with
Yep.
an attitude of like, let's be open-minded. Let's use a diversity of tactics and listen to a diversity of opinions on how this should all work.
Right. And that's just it. That last part's the one that we as a population have to get back in tap with, which is we have a wealth
Mhm.
of knowledge in this country across a vast spectrum of different parts of life and experience.
Right.
And there are people in this country who know exactly what they're doing in large protests and in large direct action senses.
Yeah.
It's good to have those people in your groups. It's also very good to have others who you may not even know but are there, and it's good to have people who are in Black Bloc. It's good
Yeah.
to have everyone you can together, because everyone has a place in the larger movement, in achieving the goals, in all of these things, and having everyone there to kind of run as separate entities that can give each other cover, that can give each other guidance, that can help each other, that can give each other permission to do other parts, to do other things within the protest. That's huge.
Yes.
That is how this works. You don't
Mhm.
get through this with a Disneyland version of protests every 2 weeks, even if you pull 5 or 6, 7, 8, 10 million people.
Yeah.
And so you have to have all of these different groups, tactics, thoughts floating around, and you're going to find that most people are amenable to a lot of the things that even people who look scary, quote unquote, because
Yeah.
they're in Black Bloc, or a bunch of punks who are anarchists, or a bunch of communists wearing red and black. Like, that's the energy you actually need and want in your
Mhm.
protest movement. And as those groups, that's where you want to be, because people are going to be amenable to what you're saying a lot of the time.
You have a chance to
And
talk to people who wouldn't have listened to you 2 years ago.
exactly.
It's time.
And so this is like, Americans, if you're in America, you know what a state fair is.
Mhm.
This is kind of the old school version of a state fair was a
Yes.
protest or a riot. And so, like, just think about it that way. I think, a lot of people get bogged down, especially online, and like, well, this isn't this, or this is too much of that. And that's a good conversation to have. But the bigger goal is everyone needs to work together
Mhm.
to protect what we can right now. And then we can sort some shit out. Because I think most people are on board doing this wholly differently.
Right.
I, myself, you, we've talked about it many times. We're ready for something new, something better, something that represents who we are and what democracy could be,
Right.
but what it's never achieved.
And I think
And
that we're not the only ones. I think that there are millions out
there are
there who
millions
feel
of
the
us.
same
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
that we need to do better and we can do better and
Yeah.
we're going to do better. But it starts with dealing with this situation that we have now in power.
Well, and that only comes like that better democracy, that better future only comes from that free flow of people
Mm-hmm.
and those conversations and getting people to think differently about what we've done, where we've been, where we come
Right.
from as a country.
Right.
And that's not going to come from, kind of neoliberal theater shit. That's going to
No.
come from the big protests, from people coming together because they feel strongly, not because they necessarily know what each other's politics are.
Right.
And those are the voices we all need to hear. Like, fuck listening to a bunch of tech bros and
Yeah.
Republican think pieces by Matthew, one of the
Iglesias.
pundits. Yeah,
Fuck
Iglesias, any of the pundits.
No, shut the fuck
And
up. Go. Don't you
it's
have
really
a sock to get on to like talk about how great your politic or your columns are, buddy?
Right.
Seriously.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, those guys don't have the actual thing.
No.
What does is the protests, is large groups of people coming together and having conversations that would never have happened before.
Right. And if
that's
that
the way
comes together,
forward.
the politicians will come along.
Yeah, that's exactly it. If we hold their hand, as much as it sucks, they will in some cases walk with us, in others they won't, and we will deal with that as they come.
Sure.
Because that's
Sucks a
all we
lot
can
less
do.
than the alternative, that's for sure.
Exactly.